Welcome to Conversate, a podcast where we engage in conversation. This week, I, Kevin Bender, am sitting down with Art Pontynen, a member and elder of St. Peter and Paul Lutheran Church. Today we're going to talk about apologetics, defending our faith, and particularly how the world looks at reality and truth, maybe from an angle that's unhelpful to them. Maybe from an angle that's unhelpful to all of us. We're going to consider what reality really is because of who has declared himself to be reality. We hope you find this conversation interesting and explorative, and of course, we hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Art.
Good morning, Pastor.
How are you today, man?
I'm waking up. How are you?
I feel pretty awake, actually. The cold weather kind of, whips in my face and gives me that refreshing wake-up call, I guess.
The change of seasons.
Yeah.
Welcome to the UP.
Yeah, it was so nice there for several weeks. I mean, the whole summer, but then even into the fall, it really wasn't getting too cold, and then all of a sudden, yesterday, I guess it was, snow started coming down.
Well, pretty soon it'll be good sledding.
Yeah. Are you? Do you like the winter?
Yeah.
That's good up here.
You get in the forest and it's covered with snow, and you're on skis, and you can feel the presence of God.
Yeah, that's true. Right, in the beauty of the nature. Yeah. Well, folks, for those of you joining us, not visually but audibly, is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Audibly. I'm here with my friend Art Pontynen. Art's a member of our church here, St. Peter and Paul. He's an elder of our church. Art, how long have you been a member here? I don't even know that, actually.
A member for about 5 years, but we spent our summers here for 30 years. So each summer we would drop in to the old church over in Hancock.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a long familiarity, but we only joined when we moved here, of course.
I got you. And where were you at that time when you were coming up in the summers? Where were you living?
In Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Oh, hey, right on.
At Trinity Lutheran Church.
Very cool. Very cool. So, man, you come over the summers, then you move up here, you become members, and right away they're like, elder.
Well, if asked, you serve.
Hey.
So.
Sure. Well, we're glad to have you, Art, and I'm thankful you're here today. One of the reasons, Art, I asked you to come on the show here is you and I had a conversation, well, just real briefly, a few weeks back, where you had expressed a kind of an interest, or maybe even more than an interest, really a familiarity to the point of wanting to share with others in the realm of apologetics. Is that right? Mm-hmm. In apologetics, if you haven't heard that term, it's not about being really sorry about something and apologizing for it. That term is talking about defending the faith, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's the battle, I suppose, against what other voices might speak against Christianity or say, well, that doesn't make any sense. You say, oh, no, it actually does. And here's this, that, or the other reason why. Mm-hmm. And maybe on an offensive front, apologetics is about exposing the ideas of the day that aren't truthful or aren't valid, right? Would you say that's...
Yeah, in my experience being a college professor, I became deeply aware that any intellectual perspective that is in harmony with Christianity is either implicitly or explicitly criticized by the much of the educational establishment. And I think that criticism needs to be responded to. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, Christians end up becoming a cult or being viewed as a cult. A bunch of people with subjective feelings about a God, and those subjective feelings aren't really part of the mainstream. So in America right now, I think we have a strange situation where a traditionally Christian society, Christianity is, I would argue, increasingly being viewed as almost a cult or a secret little club, particularly a club that isn't grounded in science.
Mm-hmm.
So if we live in a culture where science is the only way that we know anything about the world, well then religion doesn't teach us anything about the world. So the presumption that science is the only way to understand reality, that position dominates the university system now, and I think it's a corrosive effect. It causes a corrosive effect upon young people and the society at large. There's plenty of studies that there's been a slow decline in belief in Christianity in America. Mm-hmm. And in particular, if you go to college, you become part of a statistic that increasingly doesn't believe in Christianity. In other words, if you go to college, somehow you come out and you don't believe. Mm. And I think that unless we directly address that issue, mm-hmm. then all of the great preaching that happens, particularly at this church, the preaching can be wonderful, but there is a corrosive, negative campaign against genuine Christian ideas about the nature of reality in life. And I think we need to confront it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So just to make sure I'm tracking with you, Art, basically the more education you have in this country, the more likely it is you are to see Christianity as some sort of just folklore, hokey mm-hmm. kind of religion, not grounded in reality. And this is partly because societally we see reality primarily from the lens of science, mm-hmm. right? So science is the thing that's going to tell us what is true or untrue mm-hmm. versus any other voice. It's the primary voice, right?
And that's really kind of peculiar if you think about it, because science really simply provides facts. And those facts don't really explain anything. Hmm. You know, I always use the example in my classes of what is gravity? And I would start off that discussion by noting that from a Christian viewpoint, gravity is God's love. Mm. And this goes all the way back to the Renaissance with Dante, an Italian writer named Dante. And he said when he looks at the stars in the sky moving and the regularity of the whole universe operating, what causes all those stars to move the way they do? What causes this regularity? A cosmos is the word. It's not power. It's not an accident. It's love. But today, if you ask somebody, what is gravity? Well, it's just a fact, which doesn't explain anything. A description mm-hmm. doesn't explain anything. I can describe my wife to you, but you don't understand my wife. And I assure you, understanding my wife, who is wonderful, is a wonderfully difficult thing to do.
Yeah, so I kind of hear what I hear you saying, Art, is science maybe gives us language to talk about certain hows. You know, how does this do this, or how does this do that? But it's all still within this system. Like science can't tell you the why.
Exactly.
Why does it do it this way? Why does it exist at all? Why are there laws? So kind of this realm of questions that we kind of walk around at some point, I think, in a person's life, you wonder about. Mm-hmm. I mean, questions even, you know, that's maybe more abstract, right, to the universe, but you can take those same questions and focus them in on yourself. Why am I here?
Absolutely.
Why do I exist? And I suppose what science is going to tell you, it's something about an evolutionary process and you're just a product of, I don't know, that accidents of history? Would that be would you say?
Yeah, there's two problems. Number one, that this type of science, and by the way, the science has changed over the centuries. So the assumption that it's just science is really a fundamentalist viewpoint which closes down discussion. Science is inadequate, but it also teaches us to be violent. Mm. And this is a provocative point. So please bear with me while I try to lay it out. How is it inadequate? Well, gravity. Newton sees the apple fall from a tree. Well, he can describe how fast it goes and all the rest. He can describe what's happening, but why does gravity happen? Why don't apples fly out into the sky? Okay. So one explanation is that the whole universe is a machine. If the whole universe is a machine, then what are we?
Parts of the machine?
Yeah. Another explanation, or a description, or alleged explanation, is that the apple fell because it was an accident. If the whole world is an accident, then what are we? So how we understand reality deeply affects how we live and think. And if our understanding of reality is trivial or violent, then Christianity makes no sense at all. Mm-hmm. Now, how can you say that science makes us violent? Well, this is how, and we're avoiding a lot of technical stuff here.
Yeah.
It's called scientism, and that's in contrast to something called scientia, which is an earlier form of science. But to the point, if you believe that only science provides facts and only facts provide meaning, then there's a lot of facts that we can encounter in life which are nasty.
Okay.
All sorts of, let me not list them in all their nastiness, but murder, et cetera, et cetera. These are facts of life.
Sure.
If you're taught that facts are true and facts explain reality, and for example, murder is a fact, then you're taught that reality itself is violent. Mm-hmm. Also, if you focus on facts, then I can come up with a whole bunch of facts to prove that living in Houghton is lovely.
Okay.
My brother, who chose to retire in Florida, might come up with a whole bunch of facts to say, I don't want to live in Houghton. So if your understanding of reality is grounded in facts, then, which facts do you want to pick? And once you start saying, which facts do we want to pick, then we start thinking about, who's going to win the pick?
Oh, okay.
So if you approach the world from a scientific viewpoint as science is understood today, if you approach the world from a scientific viewpoint, you're being taught that we live in a world that is truly violent, that violence is normal, and that how we choose to view the world is a matter of opinion or perspective that conflict. It sets us up for conflict. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, from a Christian viewpoint, things like murder are not normal.
Sure. They go against the fabric of reality as God has created the world to operate. Yeah. Maybe what we'd call God's design. He designed the world, created it to operate a certain way, like which we would see in the Garden of Eden, and then things that run counter to that now would be not congruent with His design. That's kind of what you're saying. So murder is wrong.
Yeah, and peace and harmony is the way the world ought to be. Originally, it's the paradise that has been lost.
Yeah.
So the desire to recover the paradise lost, to recover the peaceful kingdom where the lion and the lamb lay down together, makes no sense to the person who thinks in terms of facts. It's my facts versus your facts, or it's black versus white, critical race theory, et cetera, et cetera. It's all these conflicting lifestyles. So if you are a believing Christian, then if you're living in a society that believes that facts explain the world, then you are not in harmony with that society. And that society that believes in facts is going to view your belief in peace and harmony to be religious fantasy.
Yeah, well, let me pause you there for a second, Art, because I think, as I try to take this in and understand it, I think for me there's like this language of facts, right? The facts are similar, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're similar to talking about gravity. Yeah, you can talk about the facts of gravity. They're kind of the hows of how it works as we observe it, but it's not necessarily giving you the larger picture of how or why the universe exists, moves the way it does, right?
And more than that, it's rejecting that life has any meaning.
Okay, yeah. So meaning has nothing to do with it. That's something we impose in our lives, as we, take whatever facts we choose and operate out of those facts. But you're not saying, so like we live in this world of, if people are following the kind of the scientific mindset, if that's the centerpiece of their worldview, then they're really concerned with facts.
Yeah.
And we're not necessarily opposed, as Christians, we're not opposed to facts, but we wouldn't necessarily use that terminology of facts. We'd probably say truth, right?
Exactly. Facts are...
Are facts little glimpses of a larger truth or reality that exists?
It's an inadequate view.
Okay.
Facts are explanations only for the shallow-minded.
Yeah, parts, just minuscule parts of a much greater whole.
It's like describing a person and pretending that that description of the person explains what that person believes and how that person lives his or her life.
Okay, yeah.
It reduces us to a superficiality which denies the whole moral realm. If we live in a world of facts, there is no meaning. Therefore, when a student goes to college and the student simply memorizes facts, then it's boring. Mm-hmm. And the question is, well, whose facts am I memorizing? And why am I being oppressed by that person who's selecting those facts? Mm-hmm. To my experience, the number of students that go to college today to try to actually better understand the meaning of life are viewed as being odd. And yet that used to be the whole purpose of education, to better understand. If there's nothing to understand, then all you do is accumulate facts, and particularly facts that might lead to making money.
Yeah, that's kind of where mine was going. Okay. Yeah.
But if you simply go to college to learn facts that will provide you with a way to live, then you are being taught to be a materialist and a hedonist, a person who only seeks pleasure.
Yeah.
So it ends up that you seek employment and money at the cost of nurturing your soul.
Sure.
Now, if you say, well, okay, I believe in Christianity, I believe in the church, and I go to college and to get a job, and the job will pay the bills and the church will take care of my soul. Well, that begins as a workable proposition, except that your belief, your faith, is constantly being attacked by the scientific mindset that says you're not really connected with reality, you're just a subjective feeling. So the idea that religion doesn't explain reality, but science does, eventually leads to the demise of religion.
And any adherent of
and any meaning religion in life. Yeah. In other words, you end up being taught to be good at going to the mall or being good about starting fights. But the whole idea of making the world free of violence, to making the world what it ought to be, makes no sense anymore. You don't talk about moral development as a person, as a child of God, because we just live in a world of facts. And that's called existentialism. Existentialism, we are free to make up our own minds, but there's no objective way to rightly do so.
Gotcha. So it's existentialism is getting at that problem of why do I exist? Is that the idea behind it? Okay.
And without God or truth, the only reasons to exist are pleasure and power.
Sure. Yeah.
And of course we get to the temptations of Christ, materialism, power, pride.
Okay.
You want to control the world, and yet you're in this soulless vacuum where all the control leads to no satisfaction.
Yeah, right.
Or it leads to a state of sin. And for a Christian, my understanding at least, and Pastor, you can correct me if I mess up here, but my understanding is that sin is simply being out of tune with reality.
I would agree with that definition.
Yeah.
Sin, it's funny, these concepts in Christianity, like the cross, for instance, of Jesus, or sin, they're these words that one definition usually isn't enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of different ideas about what Jesus was doing on the cross. Oftentimes we kind of go to the idea he was paying for our sin, right? Mm-hmm. But some of the early church fathers would talk about not so much from the idea of Jesus kind of substitutionary atonement, I guess is what we would call that, him mm-hmm. taking our sin upon himself. But they would see it actually as kind of this fish hook for Satan, right? So Satan was trying to get Jesus killed, mm-hmm. and Satan gets this cross idea in his mind. I'll get him killed on this cross, right? And then this turns out to be kind of the reversal, right? Mm-hmm. So not as much of an emphasis on taking our sin away, but more the emphasis on Jesus destroying Satan, kind of catching him off his guard. Even sometimes you hear in scriptures the idea of talking about a ransom, Jesus paying a ransom, which is strange, right? Mm-hmm. But Jesus will say that, I've come to give his life as a ransom for many, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, well, what does that mean? That Satan was holding us all hostage? The idea is, actually.
Yeah, or trying to.
Yes, trying to, right. Yeah. And the one problem that comes with that idea is, we don't try and equate Jesus and the devil. They're not equals. Right. It's not like a devil had one over on Jesus, but maybe it gets at what you're talking about. This idea of a scientific view of the world leading to either a pursuit of a pleasure or of violence. The way that Jesus wins us back is one that, it's in tune with God's reality, his design of the world and how it's meant to work, which means that Jesus is not going to take it by brute force mm-hmm. and violence. And he's certainly not going to get there by pleasing himself, right? Which is why he takes up the cross, why it is this way of suffering. Yeah. Well, this is fascinating, Art. I want to take us back just for a moment contextually mm-hmm. For this week, because part of the reason I wanted to have you come out on the show is, each week we kind of talk about what happened Sunday, where we're at in the story, what was our theme for the week. And this week mm-hmm. it was this, the Battle of Jericho, right? Mm-hmm. Or the Israelites taking the Promised Land. And, in my sermon I kind of talked about this battle continuing today, mm-hmm. okay? And it doesn't for us look like a military struggle like Joshua and the Israelites. We're not going in against the Amorites and the Canaanites. It's not really a physical war that we're waging, I would say, today. But it's this battle for our souls, and I think very much against our minds, mm-hmm. In which Satan, or the devil, wants to get us to believe in untruth. He wants to get us to believe in unreality. He wants us to miss the reality of what God is trying to show us, about his world being a world of love and not violence. Satan wants to distort that, or keep us distracted, maybe, from God's truth. And so this idea of apologetics and in defending our faith with our minds is kind of key to that. right? If we don't have strong mental ground against Satan's attacks, well, we're going to be somewhat easy pickings for him. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so, well, this is what we, you know, I think when Jesus says, and when the Old Testament says, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. There's a reason it doesn't just stop at heart, right? Sometimes I think this idea of love and loving God, we leave it at, well, yeah, I got a lot of good feelings about God because he loves me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. You should, you know, or that's proper and right to have this sort of feeling of love towards God and knowing that he has that feeling towards you. But we're also to love him with our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Love him with our mind. And that means, I think, to learn. To learn more about ourselves, our world, and especially to learn really the truth, which is what God says about ourselves and the world as revealed in Jesus. But it doesn't mean, and I think you would agree with this, but tell me, I mean, make sure I'm right on this. We're not saying that in this whole conversation that science is somehow inherently bad or evil.
Nope.
It's a good thing. Will we even say it's a God-given thing?
Well, yeah, certainly. But I think the contemporary definition of science as being the pursuit of facts is inadequate and leads to horrible consequences when it's inadequate. The devil is a fallen angel.
Yeah.
I would argue that science limited to facts is a fallen type, a deficient type of science. Mm-hmm. The wars that you were just referring to, you know, for the last 30 years, the culture wars have been big in the university. And some people argue that, well, they're over now because the materialist viewpoint simply won. Mm-hmm. That's historically naive because there have been ebb and flowing of this battle going on for millennia. Those culture wars, particularly, for example, between the socialist Marxists who teach in the universities and I think it's 3% of professors now are not of that persuasion.
Is that it?
Yeah, in the humanities, yeah.
Wow.
It's really absurd. But Christ is logos, John, but also agape. So there's a link between reason and thinking and love. And the link is that which we believe, we love. Understanding occurs as a form of acceptance. And in personal terms, that acceptance constitutes an act of love. So a Marxist loves Marxism as much as a Christian loves God. So the prominence of love in this whole equation can be really explosive, obviously, because a spurned lover isn't pleasant.
Ah, yeah, sure.
But we kind of forget that facts. You don't love facts. A fact is either accurate or not. But when you rise to the level of what do those facts mean, how does it explain reality existence? When you enter the realm of understanding, then love becomes prominent. And when love is transformed into power, Satan wins. Mm-hmm. And the traditional term for that, if you believe that truth is actually fact and power, then we have simply returned to the paganism that was rejected way back in by Christ, of course, but within the intellectual, theological realm. I mean, Augustine was a major force around 400 AD who tries to explain that why did Christianity prevail? Not only because, of course, I believe that Christianity is true, but that doesn't mean everybody does. Why were so many people convinced that Christianity was the way to go? Mm-hmm. Because it was the a clear alternative to violence, pagan violence. So if to associate today's definition of science with paganism may seem really kind of extreme at initial glance, but I think that there is a genuine correlation there. If you believe it's facts and power, then you have reverted back to a paganism that transforms love into hatred. And I think we have a whole lot of hatred going on right now.
Oh, sure, yeah. Wow, man, it's
and it also makes a shift from an optimistic viewpoint. To be a Christian, you're an optimist. You know, people shouldn't have cancer. People shouldn't be harmed. People shouldn't be assaulted, because reality is properly wonderful.
Yeah.
So sin causes us to lose that qualitative life. And so to believe in science as fact, I think that leads to a pessimistic viewpoint. And little wonder that we have so much trouble with drugs and seeking love in all the wrong places, as the
song goes. Yeah.
So for those who are in a Christian viewpoint, and more than that, love it and believe it, well, thank goodness, because you've escaped that pagan violence. But I think we have to be careful. We need to recognize that although we have found what we confidently believe is the real view of life, that position is constantly being chiseled away at by screw tape, by the worshipers of power and pride. So we can't be complacent and say, we have the book, we have the message, you're going to believe it. I think that there's a necessity to actively address the assault upon a peaceful mind and soul by the current definition of science.
Yeah.
You can't hunker down. You need, because otherwise you will gradually decay. And unfortunately, right now, in this moment, I think we are in that process of decay.
And of course, Jesus
so, I'm
too.
sorry, but
go ahead.
Was it the armor of God? Was that last week?
That's right. Yep.
Pick up the armor of God and fight, not for some subjective feeling about a God that's wonderful, but for a confident knowledge that harmony and peace are real, and disease and violence are a deprivation of what God wants us to have. And I just had a thought that came in and popped out of my head again.
Story of my life, Art. Story of my life. But no, I appreciate that, and I think that's a good note to kind of close us out on, is this idea that it's not enough for us to just, like you say, hunker down as kind of, okay, there's somewhat of a war going on, a battle, not only in our minds, but maybe even culturally, like you say, the culture wars where Christianity is on its way out of American culture. Now, we live, I think, in an area that is slightly behind that. It's a little, here in Houghton, Hancock, and in the Keweenaw and the UP as a whole, probably a little more Christianized than, of course, like the coasts. But we see a trend that started on the coast, decades ago, and is working its way, into the heart of America and in areas that were more, stronger in Christian culture for a long time. So we can't just hunker down in our own little private pockets, and Jesus wouldn't have us do that anyway, because Jesus is always sending us out. Jesus, he says, "You are loved by God. You are mine. I'm with you. I will protect you. You gotta listen to me." That'll help you, for the protection along the way. Let me in, let me guard you, and that was Ephesians as well. We say it sometimes at the end of our sermons, right? Or is it Philippians? Sorry, the peace of God. The peace of God will guard your hearts and minds. I believe that's in Philippians 4. But Jesus, he doesn't want us hunkered down. He wants us out, but out confidently. Not only confident that we do know the truth because we know Jesus, who is self-identified as the truth, right? But out for the sake of the others. Mm-hmm. We know peace and harmony. Now, it might come intermittently because we also live in a fallen world, but surely all of us have experienced those moments and hopefully on a regular basis of knowing I am forgiven by God. I am in a relationship with the creator of this world who has promised to restore all things. Oh my gosh, that fills me with hope and comfort and joy. For anyone out there who is believing in science as their primary, worldview, scientism we would call that science is the answer to everything, there's no hope. There's no long-lasting peace. It's, like you say, it's violent. It's, the strong will survive. One day I'm going to die. I'll never exist again, and that's it. Can
I interject with one thing?
Please.
As a Lutheran,
yeah,
the term sola scriptura is deep in our bones. Scripture alone. Uh-huh. But that does not mean a denial of attempting to actually better understand the world.
Exactly.
It's not a rejection of science writ large. In fact, as a teaser maybe, perhaps some of the viewers will think about this, to believe in sola scriptura, Scripture provides a model for a science that actually rejects violence and affirms the numinous, the reality paradise in its fullness. The doctrines of the Trinity and the doctrine of the Incarnation actually provide a model for science with meaning. Mm-hmm. And we can't unpack that here, obviously. Yeah. We don't have enough coffee.
Well, there you have it, folks. We hope that that this conversation has been helpful for you. Maybe it's been like, whoa, this is heavy. This is lofty. What the heck are you guys talking about? If that's where you're at and you have questions, please reach out to myself, reach out to Art Pontynen. He's got a lot of experience in this realm of apologetics, of understanding faith, not only scripturally, but really in a worldly way, would you say? In a way that it's not just Sunday, and it's not just in our huddles, our holy huddles, mm-hmm. but in a way that this impacts everything.
Absolutely.
Everything. So yeah, please reach out to us. We hope that you come out of this conversation realizing and recognizing that the reality of this world is created by God through Jesus. Jesus has declared himself to be the truth, and the more that we listen to Jesus, learn from him, and confidently explore our world with him with us, the world will, I think, start to make better sense to us, and we will have more optimism and hope, because we know that he's doing something about it as well, the corruption.
Amen.
So awesome. Well, thank you, Art, again for being on. God be with you, and
click.
Yeah. Okay. So long.
Bye.